Hey everyone, thanks for joining me for another unsettling story. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe for more creepypastas to keep you up at night. And now, let's get into it and see where this one takes us. I've always considered myself a night owl. Maybe that's why I was so drawn to the idea of working as a delivery driver with flexible hours. Sleep in all morning, drive at night, and collect a paycheck. It seemed like the perfect fit, until I took a contract for a small desert settlement that doesn't appear on most maps. The listing was unusually short. Looking for a reliable driver. Must be comfortable traveling at night, crossing unmarked roads, and delivering parcels to remote locations. Hazard bonus included. The extra pay tempted me. The desert was just a few hours from my hometown, and the position promised to cover travel expenses and car maintenance. I didn't think twice. I accepted, and within a week, I was headed down a lonely highway into unknown territory. A typical sign didn't mark the entrance to the settlement. Instead, I passed a rusted piece of metal that might have once been a billboard. The only clue that I was in the right place was a tall cacti cluster near a small wooden structure. The local sheriff, if you could call him that, was waiting for me there. I arrived at dusk, dust swirling around my tires. He stood like a statue, arms folded, staring at me with an unsettling calm. "Name's Cooper," he introduced himself. He wore a star-shaped badge on his faded denim jacket and had a permanent squint from the sun. "You the delivery driver?" I nodded. "I'm here for the contract." He handed me a battered leather notebook. "Town's small, but we have our ways. You'll be taking over from the last driver. Every evening you'll pick up packages from our little depot and distribute them before dawn. You do that, and you'll be paid well. But," he paused, tapping the notebook, "read these rules and memorize them. Folks out here are particular." The notebook was stuffed with handwritten notes, scribbles, and brief warnings. When I glanced at it, I saw a heading in bold letters: 6 Essential Rules for Survival. I gave Cooper a puzzled look, but he only shrugged. "You'll see," he said. "These rules, follow them. This desert is different. The people here, well, we'll leave it at that." With that cryptic remark, he directed me toward a crumbling motel where I'd be staying. I spent my first night skimming the notebook. The handwriting varied from page to page, as though several people had added their thoughts over the years. Phrases were underlined. "Never break the speed limit. Watch for lights after 2 a.m. and ignore the voices in the radio." My heart rate picked up as I read. Were these serious instructions or someone's idea of a joke? By the time I finished, the desert wind outside began to whistle against the old motel window, and I realized how alone I felt. I tried to get some rest, but I tossed and turned until sunrise. The official route was supposed to start the next evening, so I used the daylight hours to get a feel for the place. Even in daylight, the settlement was unsettling. The buildings were scattered, many half-deserted, with sagging roofs and dusty windows. A single diner, sporting a flickering neon sign, sat off the main road. I tried to peek inside, but the door was locked until evening. All told, I counted maybe 20 dwellings, a few trailers, and a school that looked like it had been abandoned years ago. Most residents didn't seem eager to say hello. They peered at me through their curtains or quickly walked inside when I passed. There was an air of guarded caution. Something told me that I shouldn't push my luck by asking too many questions. That evening, I reported to the depot, an old garage behind the only gas station in town. Cooper was already there, waiting with 6 small parcels. Each was labeled with a name and address, some scribbled so faintly that I could barely read them. "You'll deliver these in order," Cooper said, handing them to me with care. "Make no substitutions, no rearranging. Stick to the instructions in the notebook." He nodded toward the battered book, which I clutched in my hand. My stomach churned with nervous anticipation. I slipped into my car, placed the boxes on the passenger seat, and took a deep breath. The sun had just dipped behind the horizon, streaking the sky with vibrant oranges and pinks. I turned on my headlights and pulled onto the dusty main road, determined to get through the night. Half a mile later, I noticed the first note in the notebook was scrawled in large letters: "Never exceed 30 miles per hour on the main road at night." I found that bizarre. The main road was a long stretch of flat land. If anything, you'd think you'd want to drive faster to get away from the creeping darkness. But I kept my speedometer needle at 30, exactly as instructed. The desert wind howled around my car. My headlights cut a narrow path through the night. The emptiness felt suffocating. I had 4 deliveries along this road. The first 2 were uneventful. A woman in her 60s opened her door just a crack, accepted her package, and whispered a thank you. Another resident, a tall man in a wide-brimmed hat, gave me a silent nod. Neither lingered to talk. Their front yards were neat but empty, and the hush was unsettling. Things changed after I finished my second delivery. The route took me deeper into the settlement. Soon, I passed an odd sign. Warning, steep drop. But there was no visible drop-off. The land was mostly flat. I glanced down at the notebook again and found the second rule. If you see a person standing in the road, slow down but don't stop. I read it twice, a chill creeping over me. No mention of why, just a stern warning in red pen. 15 minutes later, it happened. Through the haze of my headlights, I spotted a figure about 100 yards away, right in the center of the street. They appeared to be wearing a dusty cloak or poncho, their face shadowed by a hood. I remembered the rule: slow down, but don't stop. My heart pounded as I eased my foot off the gas, letting the car drift. I expected the figure to move aside, but they stood perfectly still. I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears. The wind buffeted my car, and the figure swayed slightly, almost as if floating. Passing by them, I caught a glimpse of their face, like a carved wooden mask, expressionless and worn. But I didn't hit the brakes. I kept rolling until they disappeared in my rearview mirror. When I finally looked back, the road was empty. My mind started racing with questions. Who was that? Why were they standing there? I shook it off, focusing on the next address. The third package was for a house set far back from the main road. Following a narrow dirt path, I arrived at a modest dwelling with a single window lit from within. Nobody answered when I knocked, so I left the package on the porch. That's when I heard a faint whisper from the shadows around the side of the house. I froze. The wind rattled a rusty metal gate. I thought I saw a flicker of movement, but I couldn't be certain. That quiet voice drifted again, though I couldn't make out any actual words, just the soft hum of a melody. My hands trembled. I turned around and left quickly, climbing back into my car. The desert was playing tricks on my mind, I told myself. I slammed the door, started the engine, and forced a steady breath. The next rule in the notebook popped into my mind, as though it was whispering inside my head. Do not leave your car unlocked if you plan to step away, even for a moment. I locked my doors after that every single time, no exceptions. My route eventually brought me near the diner with the neon sign. The glowing letters flickered so sporadically that I couldn't even tell what the sign originally said. The parking lot was deserted except for a single truck. Then, from behind the frosted windows, I noticed movement, like the silhouette of someone pacing. Before the night started, I'd read something in the notebook about the diner. Never look directly at the neon sign after 2 a.m. If it changes color, keep driving. I glanced at my dashboard clock, 1:45 a.m. Not quite 2 a.m., but my instincts told me to be cautious. So I hurried past. The final 2 deliveries took me down a winding route that skirted a stretch of rock formations. Tall, angular silhouettes loomed against the moonlit sky, casting flickering shadows on the road. The desert seemed alive, breathing in the space just beyond my headlights. I took some comfort in finishing the last package, a small house with a cactus garden in the front yard. An older gentleman answered, took the box with a polite nod, and then quietly closed the door. No small talk. I flipped through the notebook to confirm I hadn't missed anything. Then suddenly, the car radio crackled to life. At first, It was just static. I turned the volume knob down, but the noise persisted. A voice hissed in and out, something about the weather. Then a faint laugh. I swear it sounded like the same melody I'd heard earlier near the third house. Heart pounding, I noticed the next rule. Ignore any voices on the radio after midnight. Do not speak back. A shiver slid down my spine. Slowly, I reached out and turned the volume all the way down. The static crackled for another moment, then went silent. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked pale. Was the radio just picking up stray signals? Or was something else at play? At that moment, my phone buzzed. An incoming text from Cooper. Return to the motel. Avoid the back road. My eyebrows furrowed. I'd seen a back road branching off earlier, a route that looked shorter. Maybe Cooper was trying to warn me. I pulled the notebook out again to see if there was a note about it. One short sentence scribbled in pencil near the back. Stay off the back road after 3 a.m. I took a deep breath. The tension weighed on me, but I followed the rule. I turned onto the main road, keeping my speed at 30 miles per hour. The time was nearly 2:30 a.m. The desert was pitch black now, with no moon to guide me, just an endless ocean of darkness. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Then I spotted movement in the far distance. A coyote, perhaps. It trotted along the shoulder of the road, matching my pace. I remembered the final major rule. If a coyote follows you, keep driving, but do not exceed 30 miles per hour. Do not slow down. Do not stop. The coyote's eyes glowed faintly in my headlights. It looked almost too large for a normal coyote, though I couldn't be certain. I kept my speed steady, my heart throbbing in my chest. Mile after mile, the coyote stayed with me, occasionally veering into the brush, then darting back near the road. It never got too close, but it never fell behind either. By the time the motel lights came into view, I felt sweat beading on my brow. My shoulders ached from the tension. The coyote peeled off into the darkness as I pulled into the motel lot. I parked near my room, turned off the car, and sat in silence. My eyes drifted to the battered notebook on the passenger seat. Every rule had proven its importance, and I felt certain I'd only brushed the surface of this place's mysteries. Exhausted, I tried to get some rest. But when I finally slipped into an uneasy sleep, my dreams swirled with hooded figures standing in roads, glowing eyes, and static-laced voices singing lullabies. I woke up at noon, drenched in sweat, the scorching desert sun baking the thin motel walls. Another night of deliveries awaited me. Days blurred into weeks. Each evening I meticulously followed the 6 rules, and each evening something new and unsettling surfaced. Once, I could have sworn I saw the neon diner sign shift colors at exactly 1:59 a.m. Another time, I heard whispering outside a house just before dawn. And always, I was careful about my speed, my locks, and the presence of any coyotes. The townsfolk never opened up, never explained why these rules existed, or who first wrote them. They just answered their doors, retrieved their parcels, and vanished back inside. If I pressed for conversation, they'd offer vague pleasantries or claim not to know anything. Cooper, for his part, stuck to warnings. Don't ask questions you don't want answered. One particularly eerie night, a new name appeared on my delivery list, the cabin on Mesa Ridge. The address pointed to a place beyond the settlement, perched on a rocky outcrop. Cooper's face tightened when he gave me the package. "You sure about this?" he asked. "It's outside the usual route." "It's on the official schedule," I replied, forcing a thin smile though my stomach churned. I'd grown to hate surprises. He just nodded, tapping his fingertips on his badge. "Be careful. The desert is hungry." I didn't know what he meant, and I didn't dare ask. That evening, I drove past the diner, its neon sign flickering a faint, sickly glow. I checked the time. 1:50 a.m. 10 minutes before, I needed to avoid looking at it. The highways were empty, the starlit sky vast but strangely smothering. I veered onto a narrow dirt road leading up Mesa Ridge. My headlights revealed jagged stones and twisting gnarled trees. Halfway up, I spotted an abandoned camper, tires flat, windows cracked. As I passed it, the radio popped on by itself. Static again, then a faint whisper. Turn back, turn back, turn back. My hands shook on the steering wheel, but I kept driving. I refused to speak, remembering the rule about radio voices. At the top of the ridge, a small cabin came into view. It had a rickety porch and a single light burning inside. No cars, no sign of life. I parked, triple-checked that my doors were locked, and approached with the package under my arm. The air was still, too still, as if even the wind dared not stir. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Finally, the door creaked open an inch. I could hear something scraping across the floor inside, like a chair being moved. Then a soft voice, impossible to tell if it was male or female, whispered, "Leave it by the door." My heart thumped. "Sure," I managed, placing the parcel just inside. Then, in the gloom, I saw a shape. It was bent over, limbs oddly elongated, like a shadow stretched in the moonlight. I backed away, every instinct screaming at me to run. The door creaked shut, and I hurried back to my car. Before I started the engine, I spotted movement in the rearview mirror, some figure standing near the edge of the porch, watching me. Its outline flickered in and out, as though woven from the shadows themselves. I didn't stick around to see more. I followed the winding road back down, pushing the speedometer to exactly 30 miles per hour, not a hair over. The coyote reappeared, trailing me from a distance. The clock read 2:15 a.m., and I realized I'd spent too long on the ridge. The diner's neon sign glowed ominously ahead, shifting from green to red. My pulse pounded in my ears. The rule about the diner was clear. Never look directly at the neon sign after 2 a.m. if it changes color. But there it was, bright and unmistakable, flickering like a silent warning. I averted my eyes, focusing on the dark road. A shimmering reflection danced on my windshield as I passed, as if the sign was calling to me. I felt an odd tug at the edge of my vision, almost an invitation to look. But I forced my gaze forward, practically counting down the seconds until I'd gone far enough that I could no longer see the glow in my mirrors. That was the night I finally realized these rules weren't about local superstitions. They were genuine survival instructions. Something intangible thrived in this desert, prowling its highways and stirring in its lonely corners. The rules shielded me, though I suspected they wouldn't guarantee my safety if I got careless. Over time, I became part of the routine. A silent traveler, delivering the items that the residents needed. I never saw what was inside those brown paper packages, and I never asked. The local folks tolerated me, though they kept their distance. Occasionally, someone would leave a small tip, an extra bottle of water or a homemade pastry. It was their way of thanking me for abiding by their rules, I suppose. Every so often, I'd catch a glimpse of something odd. A silhouette crouched behind a rock, or faint footprints in the sand that disappeared without a trace. A distant shape on the horizon that melted away when I blinked. Late at night, if I gazed toward the starry sky, I'd feel an unfamiliar sensation, like the desert was staring back. That's the only way I can describe it. I thought about quitting more than once, yet something compelled me to stay. Maybe it was the steady paycheck, or the whispered challenge of understanding what lurked beyond the dunes. I had this nagging feeling that, if I learned enough, I could protect myself, or at least face the unknown on my terms. Weeks turned into months. My old life seemed so far away. I existed in a loop of nighttime deliveries, dusty motel mornings, and short bursts of uneasy sleep. I memorized the rules by heart. I grew accustomed to the hush of the desert. And then, one evening, I found an envelope waiting for me on the seat of my car. It had no return address, just a single sheet of paper inside. "If you want answers, take the back road at sunrise. Bring the notebook." I read it over and over, trying to understand who might have left it, why they chose my car. I glanced around the empty lot. Nobody in sight. The note beckoned me to break the rules, specifically, the one about never taking the back road after 3 a.m. But this message said sunrise. Did that make it safe? Or was it some sort of trap? I have so many questions I can't answer. Should I do it? If I don't, I'll never uncover what's really happening here. But if I do, I might regret it forever. Morning is only a few hours away, and I'm writing this in my motel room, the notebook beside me. The desert wind outside rises and falls like a distant ocean. The neon diner sign has gone dark for now, and the coyote's howl echoes across the sand. The rules have kept me safe so far, but this note suggests there are more secrets, perhaps more terrifying truths, waiting along that back road. My heart is racing just thinking about it. Yet, a strange curiosity stirs inside me. No one else is going to figure this out. The people here either accept it or look the other way. If I want closure, maybe I have to take that chance. I suppose you could say I've grown attached to this desert despite its dangers. I've tasted its stillness, witnessed its hidden corners. And now there's a choice. Remain a silent cog in the machine or break the rules in pursuit of the truth. If you're reading this, it means I decided to share my story before making my move. The sun will rise soon, and I have to choose whether to keep driving the familiar route or turn onto that back road in search of answers. I still don't know what I'll do. But whatever happens next, I hope the notebook doesn't let me down. And I hope that, by writing this, I've at least warned you that some roads, some towns, and some rules are best not questioned, unless you're prepared for what you might find in the shadows. That's it for tonight's tale. If you enjoyed it, or if it gave you a case of the chills, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories like this. Remember, the world is full of mysteries. Stay curious and stay safe.